All right, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Leak, and I'm the chair of the City County Planning Board. I now call to order the September 9th, 2021 meeting, which will be conducted remotely. Due to the state of emergency, all planning board members are also participating remotely. I will now ask our acting planning director, Chris Murphy, to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. George Bryan.
Here.
Melinda Dunnigan.
Here.
Walter Farabee.
Here.
Jason Grubbs.
Here.
Clarence Lamb.
Here.
Chris Leak.
Here.
Mo McCray. Has anyone seen Mo on? I don't want to, I'm assuming she's not here because I have not seen her.
I see her.
I haven't.
She's on.
Is she?
I'm here.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Brenda Smith.
Here.
All right. And Jack Stillman.
Here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. When there is a vote, a roll call will be conducted. Each board member will be recognized and asked to clearly state their vote for the record. All guests participating in this remote meeting, either through Zoom or by phone, will remain muted until recognized by the board for comment. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and is also being live streamed on the city's website. The meeting will also be replayed on TV 13 tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and Sunday at 4 p.m. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For our public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once you have been recognized by the board, staff will unmute your microphone so that you can provide your comments. After the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless the planning board asks them a question. The items under section B of our agenda will require final action by the elected body, either the city council or county commissioners. As such, votes taken today are recommendations which are considered by the city council or board of commissioners during its review of the request. For special use district zoning request, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. If you are addressing the board today, we would ask that before you begin your comments, please give us your name, address, and zip code for the record. Our first item of business are the minutes of the August 12th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move approval.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. George Bryan.
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan.
Yes.
Walter Farabee.
Yes.
Jason Grubbs.
Yes.
Clarence Lamb.
Yes.
Chris Leak.
Yes.
Mo McCray.
Yeah.
Brenda Smith.
Yes.
Jack Stillman.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The minutes were approved unanimously.
Thank you. I'm now going to recognize Mr. Desmond Corley for our consent agenda today.
Mr. Chairman, as Desmond is pulling that up, I will just give one small caveat to your opening statements. Generally speaking, what you said is correct month to month, but occasionally we do have final development plans that we being the planning board are the final arbiters of, and we do have one such case today, and that will be the first case on your consent agenda. So the item for the final development plan approval for the Chick-fil-A at Glen Crossing will stop here, and since it has already been rezoned and this is a final development plan, we will not need two motions. We'll just need a motion to approve the final development plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to Desmond.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As usual, I ask which screen you're able to see. I've got the presentation pulled up. Are you seeing a single slide or my presentation view?
Single slide.
Wonderful. All right, so we'll get started with the consent agenda. The first item is B1, which is the aforementioned final development plan for a Chick-fil-A at the shops at Glen Crossing. This is on about 1.5 acres in the southwest quadrant of Interstate 40 and the Union Cross Road interchange. Here is the proposed site plan for this Chick-fil-A. It is about 4,500 square feet with double stacked drive-through lanes and outdoor dining area and ample parking. The site plan maintains the pedestrian connectivity throughout the shopping center and otherwise meets all UDO requirements. So staff recommends approval of this request. Oh, I'm sorry. I have one other thing to add. There is a condition that was a part of the staff report that needs to be taken out. We received a correspondence from NCDOT that would make this condition unnecessary. And so if the board is so inclined to agree with staff and approve this final development plan, you would need to just approve it, taking that condition out. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Corley? Okay. Is there anyone here to speak on this, Mr. Murphy?
Mr. Chairman, there is no one here in opposition. The representatives of the petitioner are here if you have any questions.
Okay. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing unless someone has questions for the petitioner. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board recommend approval of W3174.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. King, will you please call the roll?
And just for clarification, that did include striking the condition.
Yes, this is Clarence. Yes, and I recommend that we remove the condition, strike the condition.
There was a motion and previous second on the floor for that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan,
Yes.
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leake,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yeah.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that is approved unanimously.
Mr. Chair, the next item is not really on consent, but it is a petition to withdraw a request. It's W3483. The petitioner has been to the board, or this petition has been to the board numerous times. I think the petitioner would like to withdraw this request and come back with something that may be more amenable to staff, the board, and the community as a whole, and would provide them some flexibility to get some use out of this site. Because we didn't receive the request to withdraw before the deadline for automatic action, this has to be voted on by the boards, and we only need one vote, and that is to approve or deny the request to withdraw.
Thank you, Mr. Corley. Any questions for Mr. Corley? Mr. Murphy, is there anyone here to speak on this case?
Mr. Chairman, there is not.
All right, I'll close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I recommend that we allow the petitioner's request to withdraw.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion?
This is Debbie. I have a question. What exactly does that mean in what you just said, the petitioner request withdrawal?
It means that the request will go away, and the zoning.
I'm sorry, you broke up. Can you repeat that?
It means that the request will go away and the existing zoning will remain in place until such time as they request to change it again.
And keep in mind, this is W3483, not 3493.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, okay. That was, okay.
Mr. Murphy, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan,
Yes.
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leake,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That case has unanimously been allowed to withdraw.
All right. Mr. Corley?
Okay, we have people here in opposition for item B4, so I'm going to skip that one. We'll give you a full staff report later. Item B5 is W3494. This is a request to rezone property from LB and LI to PBL. The property is generally bounded by the east side of South Broad Street, the west side of South Poplar Street, and the south side of West Walnut Street. There is no site plan. This is a limited use application, but the request is consistent with surrounding zoning and with the intent of the PB district generally. Petitioners have limited their proposed uses to be more compatible with the area and consistent with the surrounding zoning. And there is a condition, I believe there's an existing building that is a contributing structure in the historic district. There's a condition that's proposed, should the board recommend approval, that would require the petitioner to photo document that structure if it were ever proposed to be demolished. With that, staff recommends approval of this request. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Corley on this case? Okay. Mr. Murphy, we have anyone here to speak on this one?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of anyone in opposition. And we do have the petitioner here who's available to answer any questions.
All right. If there are no questions for the petitioner, I'm going to close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion
Second.
by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Sir, Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan,
Yes.
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leek,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
All right, that was unanimous.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W3494.
Motion
Second.
by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Sir, Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan,
Yes.
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leek,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
and Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That recommendation is unanimous.
Thank you. Mr. Corley?
Next item on the consent agenda is B6. This is case F1605. This is a request to rezone 16.9 acres from AG to RS20S. This property is on the southeast side of Stanleyville Drive across, across from Motley Drive. The proposed site plan is pretty straightforward. It shows a 28 lot subdivision with the required street stubs. This request is consistent with the area and with the recommendations of the area plan. The site plan meets all UDO requirements, and so staff recommends approval of this request. And I'll answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Corley? All right. Mr. Murphy, is there anyone here to speak on this case?
Mr. Chairman, we do have a couple folks here as proponents, but we don't have anyone signed up in opposition.
All right. Thank you. Seeing no one, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. What is the
Mr.
pleasure
Chair?
of the board? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan,
Yes.
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leek,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Stillman. You're muted.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was unanimous.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I further move that the planning board recommend approval of F1605.
Motion
Second.
by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan,
yes,
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leek,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That recommendation is unanimous.
Right. Mr. Corley? You're muted.
Thank you very much.
You're
This
welcome.
item is not on the consent agenda, but we did receive a request from the petitioner for item B7 to continue their petition to the October meeting of the planning board. They did meet the deadline for automatic action, so the board will need to vote whether to allow or deny their request to continue this case.
Are there any questions for Mr. Corley? Mr. Murphy, do we have anyone here to speak on this case?
Mr. Chairman, we do have a couple folks signed up as proponents, and we have at least 5 folks signed up in opposition. I have not heard anyone on the opposition say that they were opposed to the continuance request. I believe it came as a surprise whenever the request came into us yesterday. Obviously, we have not had time to communicate that out to folks. But again, I have not heard anyone who's necessarily opposed to the continuance request, but there are folks that are here in opposition to the case.
Okay, well, there's no one here opposed to the continuance of it. I'm going to close the public hearing. And what is the pleasure of the board for this continuance?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that we continue this case to our October meeting.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan,
yes,
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leek,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that item has been continued to your October 14th public hearing.
The next
Right,
item
Mr.
on the
Corley.
consent agenda is B8, which is case F1607. This is a request to rezone 4.72 acres from IP to GBS. It's on the south side of Robin Hood Road between Lindale Drive and Olivet Church Road. And I'll just point out there's no direct access to this property. It doesn't have access on Robin Hood Road, but it is just south or behind the Robin Hood Baptist Church. Here is the proposed site plan. This is an expansion or an extension of the residential component of the previously approved West Edge development. The single-family properties to the west over here are separated from this request by the stream and its required buffers. There are no proposed connections between this expansion or this extension and that those properties or to the church property. This property itself is located within an activity center and should have minimal impact on the already reviewed traffic conditions and improvements that were looked at with the West Edge development to the east and south. The site plan meets all UDO conditions, and so staff is supportive of this request. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Yes, question, Mr. Corley. So this is not part of Brookberry and that expansion and all of that.
No,
And there's a feeling there should be only one way in and out of this.
I think that it meets or is going to meet the requirements for that fire and life safety have for access. We don't usually get in their way or step on their toes if they say that something is adequate. And they haven't left any comments that say that this is inadequate.
Okay, and then the is it an easement across the church's property that gets into this?
You would, well, I can't speak for the petitioner and they are here. I presume that this would be separated from the church property and then kind of glommed on to the west edge property, and therefore no easement would be necessary. But they could answer that question.
Okay, because as far as you know, at this point, that's a private road coming out to Robin Hood.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Brown, were all of your questions answered?
Well, I'll talk to the petitioner about it.
All right. Okay. Any other questions for staff? Mr. Murphy, is there anyone here to speak in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, there is no one in opposition. As Mr. Corley alluded to, we do have 3 folks that are here signed up as proponents, representatives of Stemwell Associates, and I believe maybe a representative of the church or the development group. I'm not sure which.
Okay. Well, I think, Mr. Bryan, if I understand correctly, you have a question for the petitioner. So if you want to address that question now, and then I'll close the public hearing.
Sure, I don't know who I'm addressing it to, but I just.
Good afternoon. We got Luke with Stemwell Associates here.
Oh, okay. Hey, Mr. Dickey, explain to me the legalities of the road and how that's being framed in this.
Yeah. So when the West Edge Apartments was
Luke, excuse me.
proposed on here, which would have been what you see the apartments to the east of this site plan, that was approved at a previous earlier date, and then the opportunity came up to buy additional property from the church in this case. So the developer is the same petitioner that is the West Edge development. So we're bringing this in basically as a phase 2 of the West Edge apartment. So this will be combined with that. So that's why we have the same request for zoning of GBS. However, we've limited to the institutional uses and residential uses. And then, of course, access, since this is basically the same developer for the apartments, is going to be through the apartment development, which ties back to the circular road that wraps around the business section with the grocery store, retail, and then it ties back out to Robin Hood Road and out to Meadowlark.
Oh, so this is connected to the previous.
That's correct. Yeah, we're connecting there. You can see that on the northeast corner. Is connecting into the existing.
So what will the road that is that goes up? It looks like.
Yeah.
Well,
so the road. Yeah. So the road that is there, that is underneath the approved West Edge mixed use development label, that continues all the way up to Robin Hood Road, and that will actually be a signalized intersection there that lines up with Olivet Church.
Okay. Thank you. That's
Thank you.
That's good.
All right. If there are no other questions, I'm going to close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryan.
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan.
Yes.
Mr. Farabee.
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Mr. Leake.
Yes.
Ms. McCray.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I further move that the planning board recommend approval of F1607.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, if you will please call the roll.
Mr. Bryan.
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan.
Yes.
Mr. Farabee.
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Mr. Leake.
Yes.
Ms. McCray.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that recommendation is unanimous for approval.
Thank you. Corley, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. We have opposition here for item B9, so that one won't be on the consent agenda. We'll present the staff report after the consent agenda, and I'll move on to C1, which is a planning board review. We only need one motion and one vote to approve or deny. This is a request for a utility substation off of Robin Hood Road. Here's the proposed site plan. It's very small. It's 0.69 acre, but it meets all of the requirements of the UDO, and therefore staff recommends approval of this request.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move approval.
Motion
Second.
by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion?
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Murphy, would
Corley.
you please? Okay, Mr. Bryan.
So will this with buffer be hidden from Robin Hood Road?
Would the facility itself be hidden from Robin Hood Road? It's a fairly
Yeah, I mean, I
small
can't figure
building.
out how big the facility is.
Yeah, it looks to be fairly small relative to the site itself. I think you would only see it if you were standing and looking into the driveway, but even then it's kind of offset from the driveway, so I don't think you'd see it from Robin Hood Road.
Okay, so you don't, how much of the buffer there is on Robin Hood Road? Is it just as much as a side buffer?
So the buffer is only required in certain areas. I don't believe there's a buffer required on Robin Hood Road, but it looks like they're just gonna preserve the vegetation that's already there. And it'll at least be as significant as well, it'll at least be what's there. But there isn't a required buffer.
Yeah. Now, they built a school. Is this out as far as a school?
Which school?
The new school that's out there, the new Louisville school.
I don't believe so.
What I'm
It is not.
trying to get a head around is, will sidewalks eventually be in this area? What's the future plan along the Robin Hood Road there in terms of expansion, sidewalks, things like that?
Robin Hood Road is a thoroughfare, and generally sidewalks are required on both sides of thoroughfares. I would imagine that there will be a sidewalk proposed at some point in the future, but I can't say with 100% certainty. I think Jeff Fansler is here. If my answer is not satisfactory, he may be able to give you more specifics.
Well, I wish I knew I had a little bit better. I'm sorry, I didn't get my book, so it's sort of hard looking at the different things. Trying to get a sense of how far out Robin Hood that is. Do you know a cross street?
So Glad Acres Road is the nearest cross street, and then you got Chickasha Drive.
Oh, Chickasha Drive.
Yes.
And that is out in that area. Yeah, then let's get Mr. Fansler to talk about what's happening to that road out there in light of all of the developments that are occurring there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mr. Bryan, directly answering your question, there are no current plans for road improvements in this particular area. Of course, there was some improvements done out in Louisville with the school you're referring to. But regarding this site, there are nothing that I'm aware of unless there are NCDOT specific plans that I'm unaware of for any type of current widening or sidewalk that's imminent in this particular vicinity.
But as far as you can tell from the site, that this would work with sidewalks and expansion.
That's correct. Yeah, what's proposed is far enough setback. With utility relocation and widening efforts, I don't imagine that with some minor modifications, we could make this work.
Okay, I think that's it. Right.
And Mr. Chairman, I just note for the record that I double checked, and it does look like all of the maps and everything are available in the agenda book that's online through the planning department website.
Perfect.
And
Thank you,
if I could just add one comment for what it's worth. I live within a stone's throw of this site. To the east of the site, the only transportation improvements I'm aware of is at that point in time when the Beltway interchange intersects with Robin Hood Road, there would be some on and off ramps just to the east of this site. To the west of the site going out to the school, which is maybe a half a mile away, George, almost all the lots on both sides of Robin Hood Road between Glad Acres and the school site are already developed. So the only scenario I see for future sidewalks going out Robin Hood Road from here is if it were to be done strictly privately. I mean, strictly publicly. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So I think there was a motion and a second on the floor. Am I correct?
Correct.
Correct.
All right, so Mr. Murphy, if there are no other questions, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan,
Yes.
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leake,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steelman.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is approved unanimously.
And the last item on the consent agenda today, excuse me, is item C2. This is a planning board review for renovations to Fallow Hill.
Desmond, okay, never mind. You're good.
Okay. The property is shown highlighted in yellow on your screen. And here is the proposed site plan. So the proposed additions are here. If you can follow my cursor, this is a proposed addition to the existing school. I believe this is an existing wing that will be demolished, and then they will add this field on the left side and this field behind the school. And then they will be reconfiguring some traffic circulation areas in front of the school. This has been reviewed by the Interdepartmental Review Committee. It's in compliance with all of the UDO standards, so staff recommends approval of this request.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I recommend approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
All right.
Mr. Corley, I had a hard time interpreting the site plan. So if you could just clarify for me, the addition that's adjacent to the large ball field, it's at the lower end of the site. Yes, where your cursor is.
Okay.
It looks like the back of the building is very close to the ball field, and I'm trying to understand, I don't understand the topography of that site, but will there be a way to walk around the building?
There is a sidewalk, and you may not be able to see it because it's covered up by like a utility line and maybe a topography grading line that's on here. But there's a sidewalk that goes around from this access road, this access drive for fire, around the building this way. And then there's a sidewalk that also connects the building to the play field.
Okay, that was what I was hoping to hear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, no other discussion, no further discussion. Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan,
Yes.
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leake,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steelman. You're muted.
I'm sorry again. Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, there aren't any other items on the consent agenda, so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Gary Roberts, who's going to present our staff report for item, I think it's
B3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good afternoon. This case is W3489. It was continued from your August meeting. Petitioner is Frank Myers Investments, LLC. So about 2¼ acres. Let's go back one image if we can. Located on the west side of University Parkway and the north side of Sunburst Circle, just north of Haynes Mill Road. The request is a special use rezoning from single family residential RS9 and LBS limited business. That portion was zoned in 2004 for a car wash to HBS highway business special use. And the request was continued for the petitioner to add some uses. They started off with just restaurant and car wash and retail store. And so the uses that are underlined there, some other commercial uses and institutional uses were added during the last month. Okay, it's located within the yellow Growth Management Area 3 suburban neighborhoods area, and it is located along the University Parkway Growth Corridor, and it is within the Haynes Mill University Activity Center. This is a zoning map showing the subject property there in yellow, again at the corner of Sunburst and University Parkway, just east of Highway 52. The site has dual zoning. That corner lot was zoned for a car wash, LBS. The remainder is single family residential. Has multifamily zoning to the north, single family zoning elsewhere along Sunburst to the west, office zoning across Sunburst, and highway business zoning across University Parkway. This is an aerial image showing the property there. Again, the residential portion is undeveloped. You have a single family home on that frontage lot there, and then the car wash and LBS. Couple of images on site. This is looking north on University Parkway. The site is to the left there. That's at the intersection of Sunburst. You can see a little bit of the wet laser wash there on the corner that's existing in the single family home just beyond that. There is a pending transportation project that would place a median, center median from the intersection of University Parkway and Haynes Mill Road, up into this area, so that the two access points that are proposed would be right in, right out. That's the single family home on the northern section of the site. Looking across there, paint store there across from University. And this is on Sunburst Circle. The site is to the right. This is looking west. 52 is in the far background. So as I mentioned, it is in the Activity Center, University Haynes Mill Road. The North Suburban Area Plan identifies this site here as transitioning the frontage properties to commercial, but keeping the residential land use on the western portion of the site. Yellow would be low density residential, brown would be intermediate density residential up to 18 units per acre. And you can see this pretty large activity center where pedestrian activity is recommended, mixed use is recommended, is pretty heavily slated towards commercial use, if you're obviously familiar with that area. So staff would probably be interested in entertaining redevelopment of the Sunburst Circle, maybe for higher density residential, but the request is really extends commercial deeper into that area. So this is a site plan. It shows two structures there. They're coming in just under 10,000 square feet total. So it will be a redevelopment of that car wash there on the corner. See the building shown in red there, right along Sunburst. That would be a car wash with a dry down and vacuum area. stacking spaces, full access, at least right now, on the University Parkway. That would eventually be a right-in, right-out. And then to the north, you have a 3-tenant retail building and restaurant with drive-through. They would also be interconnected with a car wash there and have their own access to University Parkway, which again would eventually be right in, right out. These are some pretty intense uses that they're asking for. We're looking at close to 2,000 trips per day, particularly the restaurant with drive-through of that size and the car wash, which we have peak hour rates for in your staff report, are very high trip generating uses. They have agreed they're not showing any access on Sunburst Circle, and they've agreed to continue the street yard shown in green there along the whole frontage of Sunburst. Street yards are only required where you have parking closer to the street. The 2 dumpsters are located on the western side of the site, closer to the residential. They do meet the 50-foot spacing. That dashed yellow line, that is shows where the area plan recommends commercial to the right and residential to the left. So you can see it's quite a bit of a departure from the area plan as far as extending commercial, very intense commercial zoning into that residential area. The lower elevation is what the building would look like along Sunburst Circle there, the car wash. So in summary, the adopted area plan recommends commercial uses for the frontage property and residential for the western section. It does extend intense commercial development, again, car wash and restaurant would drive through deeper into a single family residential area, and it would generate a significant amount of additional traffic at this busy area. And so staff does recommend denial, and the area plan, the site plan does meet PDO requirements. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Are there any questions for staff?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Could you share with us, Gary, what the depth of those 2 lots frontage are on a University Parkway?
Yes, it looks like the dimension shown on the site plan is 200 feet, a total of 200 feet. So
On the existing lot or on the proposed?
On the, I'm sorry, on the existing.
Okay.
Excuse me, it's a total of about 300, a little over 300 feet, Jack.
No, I mean from front to rear.
From university to rear,
Yes, sir.
that's about 300 feet.
Oh, okay.
The area
Okay,
plan
thank you.
recommends commercial basically for the first 100 feet. So this goes an additional 200 feet beyond that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Roberts, the whole lot is being considered commercial. Is there any feel among the staff if the buildings were moved closer to university, vis-a-vis your yellow dotted line, that this would be less intrusive for the communities?
Well, you would still have the circulation,
Right.
the dumpsters, the parking, all that still encroaching. So even if the buildings were moved closer, which is always recommended, in activity centers, you still got the commercial zoning and activity basically close to that residential area. And it would further preclude the opportunity for getting a higher density project back along Sunburst in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Roberts, I had a question for Mr. Fansler if he's here.
Yes, ma'am, he is here.
Mr. Fansler, I had a question about the road improvements and how this site might impact that. One of the issues that I see with the existing traffic is that traffic backs up at the intersection with Haynes Mill Road, and it backs up to Sunburst Circle. And I know you're adding some new lanes, left and right turn at Haynes Mill Road. And you also have this median coming in across from this new development. I'm just wondering if you had analyzed the impact of that many cars, we're talking almost 2,000 cars, coming in right across from that median, and how that might blunt or lessen the benefit of the road improvement, and also how it might impact the stacking of traffic at Sunburst Circle.
Then, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. And Ms. Dunn, again, directly answering your question. That's a great question, by the way. And Winston-Salem DOT and NCDOT spent a lot of time discussing this very topic of how the proposed project incorporated, growth in this area. So I will tell you this. What's done with these high-profile NCDOT projects is what's called a traffic forecast, where we forecast what traffic will be when the project is built out. And doing so, we do a growth factor, and we apply growth to an area based on types of uses. And we refer to the area plans, we refer to growth tendencies in the area, and we apply growth to that forecast. So, as we mentioned before, you've heard me say, we have to use our modeling capabilities to analyze this, but some really concrete methodology was applied to analyzing what traffic will be with the traffic forecast. So I say all that to say, when the design was done for the road improvements, the additional lanes, the median, one thing you didn't mention was a lot of effort around signal design and optimization. So we're going to be changing signal phasing, changing the way that signal is timed to help ease some of that congestion on top of the turn lanes that you mentioned that are part of the project. So we did model growth, we did model a more intense use, and we are going to be making some strategic improvements to handle the additional traffic. So all of that said, in coordination with NCDOT, we feel confident that what's proposed with our project is sufficient for this additional traffic that will be generated from this site. I hope that answers your question.
Well, the one issue I see is the driveway for this project being so close to Sunburst Circle. As all those cars exit, I still see a problem with being able to get out on from Sunburst onto University.
And that's a great point. One thing that, as you're well aware of, it will be right in, right out. So you'll be only able to make one movement. Now, I will tell you, the car wash's heaviest day is a Saturday. So Saturday at lunchtime, there may be some challenges. And what we always will look at is signal optimization. And we try to do things with signal timing that's called the platooning effect, which is essentially time that where we could create enough gaps to allow a gap for the turning vehicles. But you're right, they are close in proximity, and I won't say that you'll never have a difficulty getting out, but all that being said, there will be strategic gaps because of the signal, and we are minimizing the conflicts by putting the median in. So the improvements that are making will benefit the area given the additional traffic the site will generate.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Fansler, when you're looking at your estimates, are you estimating that traffic will double because of the Beltway connection slightly up from this?
That's a good question. I'm not thinking I'm prepared to answer that exactly as far as doubling. University Parkway carries several thousand cars a day, and it's a major facility. And doubling that, I don't know his accurate statement. Best I can tell you, Mr. Bryan, is that I'd have to follow up on the specific numbers. There will be an increase in traffic. There will be different circulation because of the ramps there and the Beltway alignment that does come in just north of this site. But again, while we're putting the median in and we're stretching it so far to really, in this more intense area closer to Haynes Mill Road, we try to minimize the turning movements and control that. So that's really not a direct answer to your question, but we do think it will not be as impactful as it may seem.
Well, it does seem like we're approving also more development down toward the apartments that are behind where this proposed site is. And it does seem like there's a great deal of pressure for additional residentials along there. So I'm sure this is even that intersection deserves some view, even if this project isn't approved right there with Sunburst. Yeah.
I have a question, Mr. Fansler. I see the median on the rendering. So if I'm traveling north on University, how would I get into the site? Because I see the median is the full length of the site. Where would be my turnaround?
So that's a great question. And, you know, that's going to be a driver use. U-turns will be prohibited at the end of the nose of the median. So you're not going to be able just to go there and turn around and get into the site. So there are signal modifications that are already in place with the Beltway just north of this site at Stanleyville Drive. There's additional improvements north of this site as well as part of the Beltway where U-turn movements could potentially be allowed. Now, all that being said, northbound traffic will have to determine their best use based on size of vehicle and where they ultimately want to go, where the best turning point would be. So it's not a direct answer, but essentially that would be the most difficult movement.
And when would we expect that the Beltway or at least the Stanleyville improvements would be available?
That's a great question. I believe the current completion date for that segment is late 2023 when they would actually go live with traffic. And there's a lot of contingencies with that, but I believe that's a 2023 segment of the Beltway. You know, they're going to open it and do different things in segments, but I believe that's where we're at with that one.
Okay, well, thank you. And otherwise, I was just going to say that, you know, looking at the area plan, I know, as we've discussed, that the front third was originally identified for commercial and the rest being residential. I understand that given the existing structures that were already there, but looking at this proposal and just thinking of land, it seems that it was going to be very unlikely that just a sliver of land would be developed along University. And so this being a larger commercial site seems to make sense to me, but that's all I had.
Right. Are there any further questions for staff at this point?
I would just add for everyone's consideration in response to what Mr. Farabee just said, there is increasing interest in commercial development along University Parkway in and to the north of this area. A majority of the properties with University Parkway frontage are on the market for sale because people don't want to live there anymore. I think we're going to be really challenged to attract new residential development to this street. We're in a real catch-22 right now. But I am seeing increased interest in commercial uses, decreased interest in residential.
Thank you. All right. If there are no other questions for staff, Mr. Murphy, do we have anyone here to speak on this case?
Mr. Chairman, there is no one in opposition. Of course, this was a denial recommendation, so that's why we did have the public hearing. We do have a couple folks here as proponents, Luke Dickey with Stemwell Associates and Sam Simpson. I believe that Mr. Dickey will probably lead off, and then I'm not sure if Mr. Simpson will speak, but with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Dickey, and you need to get him sworn in.
All right, Mr. Dickey, if you don't mind stating your name, address, and zip code for the record before you speak, please.
Sure thing. Thank you, Chairman. Luke Dickey with Stemwell Associates. Address is 601 North Trade Street, Suite 200, Winston-Salem, 27101. And I am representing the petitioner today, and Mr. Sam Simpson is the developer. He'll be able to answer any calls as well, but I'll do the majority of the presentation. So you can go ahead and move to the second slide, please. So I just want to start off with the amount of neighborhood outreach that we had done on this site. So the site there is in yellow, highlighted. Everything in red is where we sent invitations out to property owners. There was also multiple rentals and apartments in this area as well. So we made sure we sent that out to each one of those residents within those apartments if we had the addresses for them. So a total of 156 invitations were sent out. We did hold a neighborhood meeting at North Forsyth High School, which is not too far from this site. We had 10 neighbors in attendance on that, and also 1 phone call. 2 of the neighbors out of that 11 were actually on Sunburst Circle, one being at the very end, which is labeled lot 19, and then lot 17, and had given us a call after the meeting to kind of discuss it. That meeting went really, really well from that sense, and all the neighbors actually were supportive of the project. Their main concerns obviously was the traffic that happens on University Parkway itself currently, and then of course what's going to be happening with the road improvements there in the future, knowing that Sunburst Circle was going to be limited to a right in and right out. Next slide, please. So this is kind of going to, this is the kind of the plan for what's happening on Haynes Mill Road and on University Parkway. This is just a preliminary plan. It's not the final drawings, but obviously you can see the impacts of the amount of lanes that are going to be added into that, for that signalized section. So you got Haynes Mill Road there in the middle. There's a little blurred section where it says BB&T on the corner. The express oiled service is right there in the middle site fronting on Haynes Mill Road. That is actually going to have to find a new location for that shop because the right-of-way taking for that is going to cause them to have to be dislocated from that location. And then our site is just there to the north. You can see Sunburst Circle there with the median going through. Next slide, please. This is just kind of the area plan that was called, and with that right-of-way improvements that was overlaid on the site for University Parkway and Haynes Mill Road. So you can see that the solid kind of green line there outlines where the new proposed right-of-way is going to be, kind of based on the plans that we have received from NCDOT. You can see it right there on Haynes Mill Road, right in front of the Express Oil. It's clipping the corner there at the BB&T. So basically that drive aisle on the side may or may not be taken out with that. And then as you move further on the north side of Sunburst Circle, really there was adequate enough right-of-way in front of the site to maintain the existing right-of-way there, but a little bit would be added on Sunburst Circle for kind of the turn movement for the radius there. Kind of the key point to kind of pay attention to is I understand, the area plan calling for commercial uses to be on the front of Haynes Mill Road and also University Parkway. However, you see with the impacts of this kind of development, especially on Haynes Mill, we've got depths of lots that currently for commercial at 80 feet, 99 feet, 101 feet as you move across that section. So we know an existing business is going to go away, and not sure what's going to happen to the BB&T building there from a circulation standpoint. They may try to look for a new location as well, but any redevelopment on Haynes Mill Road is going to be very difficult to do following that area plan, and the lots at the back you can see, which are the single family lots, really would need to be incorporated into any future commercial development along that Haynes Mill Road section. Same thing then happens on University Parkway. You can see that roughly it's 127 feet or so on that frontage, and then we got the vacant lot that's kind of behind. Again, the neighbors were supportive of the redevelopment. Actually, a lot of them were thinking, could you come and buy us out from our locations as well, because of the fact we see the changes that are coming. We see what's happening with University Parkway, Haynes Mill. We are cut off, when 52 of the ramps were put in there, that cut off the back exit onto Sunview. And so they knew that this kind of area was slowly changing, and they were really kind of looking at opportunities to sell as well. So they had asked the developer to look into that. So overall, go to the next slide for me, please. And it hasn't changed on my screen.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you. So this is the site plan. So again, Mr. Roberts did a great job of kind of walking through what the proposal was with the car wash on the south side there along Sunburst Circle. Again, there's a car wash on that existing corner right now, and then a multi-tenant building located on the north. Overall, this is basically just over a 2-acre site. So redevelopment for most out parcels, minimum size that you usually see is 1 acre to be able to accommodate commercial development. And each one of these lots then at that point is really just over 1 acre in overall size. Again, we're limited to the right in, right out because of the University Parkway improvements, and then this kind of connectivity For the circulation, of course, for the proposed car wash, it's kind of why it's in its location that it is, to make sure you got the proper queuing and stacking that's required by code, the vacuum stations, and then to be able, as you go through the car wash, to be able to pull around front and then come out from some dry bays and everything there. And then we lined up, of course, it provides some parking in front of the retail buildings, and then provide that circulation around the backside as well. Next slide, please. Again, this kind of really emphasizes where that existing commercial line is right now that runs through the building. And Mr. Roberts has shown that also on his slides too. One thing to also keep in consideration for any commercial development, if that stays residential behind on this lot, there's a 40-foot building setback then that gets applied off of that red line. So right now, we got that going basically through the middle of the building, and we only have a row of parking in the front. So to redevelop that site for any commercial is just not really feasible. So again, key kind of highlights we want to call out is the redevelopment of the front lots limited by its lot depth. The redevelopment of car wash, which is already on the site, is on the 1.07 acres. And of course, in that mixed use commercial building is on the 1.18 acres. We're not providing any access to Sunburst Circle, so again, no commercial traffic is actually going to be exiting out onto Sunburst. Currently, the car wash that is existing on Sunburst Circle does have an access point there, and so that would be eliminated. Everything would go out to University Parkway. Again, we're going to agree to extend the street yard along the complete frontage of Sunburst Circle for where the proposed car wash is. Modify the elevations per staff request to kind of show that adding the faux windows to get it more of a pedestrian scale along that facade. And then, of course, just for code requirements, there are significant buffering requirements along the residentially zoned property. So they're on the, basically that's on the backside, and then also on the north side against the adjacent multifamily residential, and there's also a single family lot. And then, so if you go, next slides will just kind of show that's kind of the rough elevations for the multi-tenant building. And then the second one, next slide, please, is for the car wash in that location. Final slide, and I'll wrap up the presentation here. Again, kind of reasons why we believe that it's good to approve this is the proposed expansion of Haynes Mill Road and University Parkway for NCDOT TIP project, U2729, is going to result in significant impacts to the northwest corner of the University Haynes Mill Activity Center. The existing and designated commercial tracts for the area plan north of Haynes Mill Road are significantly impacted by the widening of Haynes Mill Road. And these impacts of the road widening and future market pressures, I think, points towards the viability of commercial uses in this quadrant and sector. The existing commercial parcels and designated commercial parcels for the area plan along western side of the university are less than 130 feet in depth and difficult to develop or redevelop without additional land. Combining of all the lots provides for the redevelopment of the site and would be a positive economic contributor to this area. The plan limits impacts to Sunburst Circle, like no connectivity, the extension of the street yard, improves elevations that I already mentioned. Also, we are going to be adding sidewalk, curb, and gutter along that section that will provide those residents on the backside to be able to walk around to the multi-tenant facility off of University Parkway and sidewalk connectivity there. Again, we have no opposition from neighbors present, and it wasn't expressed in the neighborhood meeting or like that. And so we request that you consider our proposal and for approval. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, Mr. Dickey. Do you have a way to soften the impact of the dumpster location, which is close to where the residential development is? Is there an alternative place you could put it? It wouldn't be so.
Yeah, we are, of course, meeting code requirements. We have it screened. We could look at adding additional screening just from a site circulation standpoint. There's really not a good location out front up against University Parkway that we could look at, but we'd be willing, I think, to look at potentially where those locations can be in a different manner.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dickey, have you guys gotten to the point of looking at lighting? I'm just thinking of that parcel, that single family residential parcel that abuts the property. And I agree, I think the commercial use is fine. But how do we kind of protect them as it's currently still residential from that light pollution?
Yeah, so good question on that. And of course, the ordinance has been modified and changed. That would make sure we have full cutoffs and everything at the property. So there's 0 foot, or it might be a half foot candle. I can't remember exactly what it is at the property line.
0.5.
Yeah. So that will make sure that that's in compliance, and of course that's reviewed by staff as we go through the permitting process. On that, we have to provide a lighting plan to make sure that those impacts aren't on that adjacent property owner. And plus the buffering, that's going to be that's a pretty intense buffering, the type along that adjacent property, the additional evergreen screening and everything else that would be required there, I think would help dissipate any other light pollution that would go onto that lot.
Are there any additional questions?
Mr. Chairman, there was still about 2.5 minutes left. I'm not sure if Mr. Simpson wanted to speak, but we do have just a little bit of additional time remaining.
Mr. Simpson, would you like to speak for the last 2.5 minutes of this, or are you going to leave it with Mr. Dickey?
I think he covered everything, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Okay, I don't see any other questions. I'm going to declare at this time the public hearing closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is, I guess, technically inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. King, would you please?
Yes. Sorry. Everyone froze for a bit, so I didn't hear what the motion was.
The motion is, this is Clarence, that the planning board find that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thanks.
Previous motion and second on the floor. Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryan.
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan.
Yes.
Mr. Farabee.
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Mr. Leake.
Yes.
Ms. McCray.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Steelman.
Yes.
All right.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3489.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that I disagree that we should approve this really on the basis of the heavy impact that this would have on the residential area. I might disagree from some of the other board members in seeing, I do see this as a viable residential area. I think it's a neighborhood, a small, modest neighborhood that's tucked away and is very functional the way it is now. And I think it is possible to, in the future, redevelop if that, option comes available as a more dense development that would complement the activity center. So I don't think we should give up on the plan, which was to include residential in this location.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Donegan.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to vote for this, but I really think that DOT has to look at some other plan there at Sunburst Circle where it comes in there, which is impacted by this property. And right now it's just untenable in terms of the way the traffic's going to go for the poor people coming out of Sunburst, and as well as the anticipated tremendous use of university. I don't think we have it solved yet. I think it is solvable though. Thank you.
All right, so there is a previous motion and second on the floor. I think it's important to realize, there was considerable neighborhood outreach on this, and so just keep that in mind as well. Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a reminder, this is for approval, a recommendation
Correct.
for approval of the site plan. Mr. Bryan.
Correct.
No.
Ms. Dunnigan,
No.
Mr. Farabee,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Lamb,
Yes.
Mr. Leake,
Yes.
Ms. McCray,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steelman.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that recommendation would move forward to council under a vote of 7-2. And with that, we'll hear item B4, which I believe is also a presentation by Mr. Roberts. And Gary, you're muted. Okay, there
This
you
is
go.
zoning docket W 3493, Archie F. Newton heirs. It's a petitioner. Site is just short of 64 acres and it's located on the north side of Crownsville Road between Scotland Ridge Drive and Calvin Road. It's a special use rezoning with a site plan from single family residential RS9 to RM5S residential multifamily, maximum density of 5 units per acre for a mixture of single family homes and townhomes. This is Legacy's growth management plan. It's located within the yellow growth management area 3 suburban neighborhoods. It fronts along the Highway 150 Crownsville Road growth corridor as well. And Legacy does recommend a variety of housing types. This is a zoning map showing the subject property there in yellow. It's for the most part undeveloped except for one single family home and some accessory buildings. Again, it's on the north side of Crownsville Road there. Zoned RS9, as is most all of the property surrounding it, particularly to the south and to the east along Dumont Drive and along Baxter Road to the west, to the left. There are some property zone RM8S to the north. That's part of Vernon Farms. And there is a small little bit of MH zoning just to the south of the site on Crownsville Road. This is an aerial image of the subject property. You can faintly see a overhead transmission line that pretty much divides the property east and west. There's also Nichols Lake that's located on the subject property, and that would remain, as you can see on the site plan I'll show you shortly. It is in the Salem Lake watershed. It's in actually the protected area where impervious coverage, driveways, rooftops, streets, etc., is limited to 12% in this protected area unless stormwater controls are utilized, which they are in this request, and they can go up to 30% impervious coverage. A couple of images on site. This is at the intersection of Crownsville Road and Farmingdale Avenue. The site is to the left. If approved, they would be required to install left and right turn lanes here at this intersection. You can see the transmission tower there dividing the site. Looking east on Crownsville Road, the site is to the left. This is again Highway 150. It's classified as a major thoroughfare. The existing capacity of this road is about 39,000 cars per day. Currently, there's a little over 14,000 cars per day traveling this section of Crownsville Road. And this is back in the other direction. So the site is now to the right. This is looking west on Crownsville Road. There you can see Farmingdale Avenue in the background. The petition would be required to dedicate additional right-of-way along Crownsville Road, as well as make a payment in lieu of for future sidewalk construction. That's called for in the comprehensive transportation plan, but there's no sidewalk segments out there in this area, so that's why they would make a payment in lieu of. This is right about with the area on the site where Calvin Road intersects with Crownsville Road. There is a left turn lane currently now in place on Crownsville Road into Calvin. And if the right of way is sufficient, which we believe it is, they would be required to install a small right decel lane at that intersection as well. And this is on Calvin Road. One last image, the site is to the left there. Where that orange arrow is pointing, that's the intersection of Opportunity Road and Calvin Road, where the second connection would take place. They would be required to improve Calvin Road 13.5 feet from center. That would be on the left-hand side there, and install sidewalk, curb, and gutter. It is within the Southeast Suburban Area Plan adopted in 2016. It looked at this site specifically and recommended, again, because it's along a growth corridor, intermediate density residential up to 18 units per acre. And you see some of that also recommended further to the north within Vernon Farms. However, this request is significantly below that. They're actually coming in less than right around 2.5 units per acre. So it's actually much lower density than what the area plan recommends for this particular site. Yellow would be obviously low density residential, and there's a little bit of red over in Vernon Farms recommended for commercial. This is a site plan, a little bit different orientation. So to the right, you would be going north, that's towards Salem Lake. To the left, you have Crownsville Road. And to the south, you have Calvin Road and Dumont Drive. There at Calvin Road, you can see the blue areas. That will be the connection there. And then the other entrance across from Farmingdale Avenue, on Crownsville Road. You can see Nichols Lake. That would remain in place. This is a mixture of townhomes and single-family homes. Basically, the single-family homes are to the right as individual lots, and then about 69 townhomes on the section that's closer to Crownsville Road to the left. So on this larger tract, that comes into about 2.5 units per acre. The current zoning RS9 with a planned residential development scenario would allow actually over 300 homes on this property with clustered lots. And that would generate a significant amount of traffic, about 3,000 trips per day. The current zoning now, with the proposal, we're looking at about 915 trips per day as far as traffic. So really, this is still low density. It's not high density, and the traffic generation is significantly less than what would be what could occur under the current zoning. The transportation impact analysis was submitted, and I mentioned to you that the transportation improvements that the petitioner has agreed to. The petitioner has also agreed to sidewalks and street trees along both sides, and they're consistent with the Salem Lake watershed. They will be under 30% impervious coverage. Staff did look at a stub street potential to the north, to the right, but the development pattern, the street pattern for Vernon Farms in that section did not allow such a connection to be made. And these are the proposed elevations for the townhomes. So in summary, they are requesting lower density and fewer units, both than what the present zoning would allow and what is recommended in the Southeast Suburban Area Plan update. Therefore, it should generate significantly less traffic than what could be expected under the present zoning, again, which could be up to 2,900 trips per day versus 915. And it includes a variety of housing types consistent with Legacy's recommendation, particularly along a growth corridor. And the traffic improvements would be fairly significant along Crownsville Road would be provided. Now, there's one small condition added to what was in your agenda book there. This was noted in the transportation section, the intersection there, Farmingdale Avenue and Crownsville Road. They're going to have to provide a left-hand turn. What we did not put in the condition there is a right turn lane with 25 feet of storage. So that little area highlighted in green, that just needs to be added to the recommended conditions. And so staff recommends approval with that amended condition, and the site plan does meet UDO requirements. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Yes, Mr. Roberts.
Yes, ma'am.
Just had a question for clarification on what you were saying about the PRD scenario and how the number of trips that would generate.
Yes.
Is that scenario one that where the PRD takes into account the unbuildable part of the property, like the utility easement and the lake, or are you assuming the whole acreage built out?
You would take the whole 64 acres, and it would be up to the site designer to creatively work those lots in outside of the easement. That would, particularly with that in the lake, that's maybe not likely to happen, but it's theoretically possible.
Theoretically, to get the 300 on that site.
Yes, ma'am, 309 lots. That's correct.
All right, great. Thank you.
And of course, they would still have to comply with the Salem Lake watershed impervious coverage.
Right.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Roberts or staff?
I have a question.
Yes.
So have you, Mr. Roberts, been on the property?
Mr. Chairman.
So I'm sorry, Ms. Williams, I've not opened the public hearing yet. If you don't,
so sorry.
Yep. No, that's no problem. This is just for the planning board at the moment. All right. Are there any additional questions for staff from the planning board? All right. Seeing none, Mr. Murphy, do we have anyone here to speak on this case?
Mr. Chairman, we do. We actually have 5 folks signed up in support and 5 folks in opposition. I believe Ms. Shirley and her team, I will turn it over to Ms. Shirley. I believe that she will lead off the presentation, and I'm not sure if the other folks that are here in support are going to give presentations or are just here to answer any questions. And like I said, we do have 5 folks in opposition as well.
Okay, well, if that's the case, I'm going to open the public hearing. And again, there is time limits for the public hearing. And when you do present, please give us your name and your address and your zip code for the record. Again, for our public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. So, Mr. Murphy, I'll turn it over to you so you can address them.
Ms. Shirley?
Good afternoon. I cannot start my video, but I'd be happy to. I do have a presentation. Okay. Hello, everyone. I do have a presentation. If Amy would be so kind as to share that, or oh, perfect.
Okay, and Ms. Shirley, if you would also give us your name, address, and zip code for the record, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Sarah Shirley. I'm a senior planner with American Engineering. My address is 8008 Corporate Center Drive, Suite 110 in Charlotte, North Carolina, zip code 28226. So, good afternoon. I am actually here with Mr. Kyle DiProtoro, who's the developer for the property, as well as Mr. Scott Stone, professional licensed engineer, who can help answer questions before he has to hop off for a 6 p.m. meeting, but I can certainly answer any questions that staff or planning board might have. Amy, you could go to the next slide, please. So as Gary pointed out, the plan for this property in this part of town was anywhere from 8 to 18 units to the acre, and we have a proposed density of 2.7 was the previously proposed density. We're hoping to maintain a little bit of flex in that. We've got a couple of revisions that we could possibly do, but currently the proposed density is at 2.5, as Mr. Roberts stated. Next slide, please. On Monday, August the 23rd, we hosted an in-person and virtual neighborhood meeting to gather information and feedback on the proposed Wooten Farms. We heard 4 main comments: traffic, schools, stormwater, and buffering. As per what Mr. Roberts stated, a traffic impact analysis was performed, and we do have our transportation engineer available here, Mr. Nick Burns, for questions as needed. That traffic impact analysis did not recommend any improvements, but NCDOT has come back and stated that the turn lanes on Crownsville would be required. And we are agreeable to that. We're also agreeable to, if the right-of-way exists along Calvin Road, we can consider a right turn lane on Calvin Road. We've actually been in communications with Forsyth County Board of Education to obtain current enrollment rates for the schools that currently route to our project. And they've kindly provided those. Those are actually publicly available on their website. And the 3 schools that route to us are actually have in recent months declined in terms of enrollment. The area is reserved for stormwater are intended to be dry retention basins within the Salem Lake watershed. We're only allowed to develop a maximum of 30% of the site using those storm control measures. So of that 63 acres, we roughly can only develop about 19 acres maximum. Those stormwater areas are going to be designed and sized and reviewed by licensed professional engineers within a private engineering firm, and also reviewed and approved by state and local officials. So they'll go through a significant amount of review and approval prior to construction on the site, regardless of this use or another proposed use. The stormwater areas will also be perpetually owned and maintained by the proposed Wooten Farms HOA. We are providing external buffering as per the land use ordinance, and the proposed uses are residential in nature, complementary to the existing adjacent uses. The proposed site actually slopes away from the adjacent properties down to the internal Nichols Lake on the site. And the average distance between our external property line and closest home averages anywhere from 100 to 150 feet. We actually will be proposing, as you can see this little diagram at the bottom of the page, every external perimeter will have a buffer to it, 20-foot minimum, 40-foot generally around the townhomes. And you can see the slope is actually into our site. So whereas we will have 2-story homes, they'll appear to be almost 1-story homes in comparison with the external sites. Next slide, please. So based on the rezoning requested, we are required to build generally what is shown on this submitted plan. Resides within the growth management area number 3, which does propose urban neighborhoods, which is what we're proposing. Market demands have been for homeowners who want a high quality home on a smaller lot, basically offering less or no exterior maintenance. As part of Wooten Farms, we'll leave a majority of the forested areas on site remaining in forest. The majority of the site has been recently farmed, and so where we can preserve trees, we are happy to do so. And where there are no trees that exist, we're going to have a proposed large maturing evergreen and deciduous mix buffer along those perimeters. We'll offer amenity areas for the entire community, as well as a walking trail around that pond. Next slide, please. This diagram is to show that the proposed minimum front yard setback is actually 15 feet according to ordinance. We are actually proposing to maintain it at 20 feet in order to keep cars off sidewalks. One of our pet peeves is actually to have cars overhanging on sidewalks. So we want to keep that pedestrian friendly access around the neighborhood open. Next slide. And these, again, are examples of our 1-story and 2-story homes that we're offering, as well as our townhomes. So townhomes will offer at least a 1-car garage. Our single-family homes will offer most likely 2-car garages. And we are offering a mix of 1 and 2 stories for the single-family homes. So with that, I'm available for any questions, and I'll open it to everyone else who would like to speak. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there's about 6.5 minutes remaining for the proponents.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak on the proponent side?
Is it my turn now?
Not quite.
Sorry.
I'll just, Nick Burns, Asha Burnett, Kyle DiPertoro are all signed up. I just don't know if anyone wishes to speak.
Hey guys, this is Nick Burns. I'm the principal engineer in Impact Designs. We did the traffic study on this project. My address is 172 Williamson Road, Mooresville, North Carolina, unit 3728. I think Ms. Shirley and Mr. Roberts summed up the traffic report pretty well already. As far as the traffic generated from this site at 915 a day is fairly low. And from a numbers perspective, it did not warrant any mitigations along Kernersville Road. However, the developer has worked with NCDOT and Winston-Salem DOT and agreed upon making additional improvements on top of what was in the traffic study in an effort to improve the flow along their frontage.
All right, anyone else on the proponent side?
Yes, I would like to say something. My name
All right,
is
Ms.
Aisha Burnett. Yes, I am a realtor with Keller Williams, Kernersville, and I also live
Pardon
right
me,
off
excuse me.
Kerners. Oh, I'm sorry.
If you could give your address and zip code, please, for the record.
I'd rather not expose my address. I can send it to you privately.
Can you give your business address, please?
Absolutely. 1407 Kernersville Road, Suite D.
And zip code?
Sorry, I'm sorry, 1407 NC Highway 66, Suite D.
And your zip code.
27284.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And so yes, I am actually a Keller Williams realtor here in Kernersville. I'm also a neighbor. I do live off Kernersville Road. I've been there for about 7 years. So I was able to attend the community event a few weeks ago and met Scott Stone. And I would just like to send out a couple of things just as an update as far as the housing market goes. Obviously, everyone knows it's been a bit of a inventory shortage. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity to provide more housing development. Also to increase the market value for the houses that are neighboring the new subdivision, as well as providing some economic development for the Kernersville area as well. There were some concerns about the traffic congestion and the school being able to accommodate. As you guys have already mentioned, they've already confirmed that this wouldn't be much of a defect for that. And economic development is always good for us. And maybe sooner or later, they will be willing to widen the roads at some point. But until there's more population, that's something that they won't be able to consider. I do know they are adding some lights and things like that to help decline the traffic congestion and so forth. So I also think that the new 74 bypass will help eliminate some of the traffic concerns as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Mr. Murphy,
you.
how much time is left for the proponents?
Mr. Chairman, there's about 4 minutes left, but I'm not sure if there's anyone left to speak. Going once, going twice. Mr. Chairman, you may want to call on opposition. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I was muted. Hey, Mr. Murphy, this is Kyle DiPertoro. My address is 254 Kingsley Park Drive, Suite 110. That's Fort Mill, South Carolina, 29715. I'm the developer on the project. I don't have a ton to add to it. I just wanted to make myself available for any questions, anything relative to the type of construction or type of homes we plan to build here. We took a page from Vernon Farms. I know that there's been some negativity around maybe Vernon Farms. I can't really speak to that specifically, but I think the overall design and the intent of that project was thorough with regard to a variety of different demographics with home types, home sizes, price points. So I think we tried to mimic that to a degree. We certainly took into account the future land use plan and tried to be thoughtful and intentional with regard to the number of homes that we had on site. And as Mr. Roberts alluded to, obviously we're well below what the future land use plan calls for at 18 an acre, and we're below 3. So we also wanted to make sure that it was known that we definitely heard the neighbors' concerns when we met with them. We definitely took those into consideration, and we tried to think about those with regards to buffering, spacing, and then obviously some of the comments and concerns that they had relative to their experience with construction behind them that were very negative. We've certainly taken those into consideration as well as best we can. Obviously, there's nothing we can do about that today, but we intend to be much better neighbors than it sounds like maybe they've had in the past. So I wanted to speak on behalf of that. And like I said, I'm available for any questions or anything that anyone has for me.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that is everyone for the proponents. And with that, we can turn to the opposition. And Mr. Chairman, I have 5 folks signed up. I'm not sure who wants to lead off. If they have a spokesperson, if all 5 folks want to speak, just keep in mind there is a total of 12 minutes. And with that, I'll just open it up.
Ms. Williams, it's now your opportunity.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to take up everybody's time. I don't know. I guess my first question, has anybody,
If you could give us your name,
sorry,
address, and zip code.
sorry, Mitzi Williams, 251 Dumont Drive, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27107. My first question is, has anybody walked the land over there? Everybody has all these opinions, but the land is very uneven. The pond is in the center of it. It's kind of like a bowl. And they had to dynamite like all around us. And I'm sure that they're going to have to do it over there. You know, I don't know if they've even surveyed the land to see if it's workable. I mean, it's just a beautiful piece of land. But anyways, my wish would be that the city would purchase it and connect it to the Salem Lake Walkway, because it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of property. And I just feel like the kids don't have enough places to go anyways. But anyways, I have a lot more stuff I'd like to say, but I know that time is limited, so I'll let somebody else talk. But anyways.
Thank you.
Here are the folks that have signed up: Mr. Butner, Miss Swaim, Miss Blake, and Miss Petrie. I'm not sure who would like to go next.
I'm available to go next if that's okay.
Okay.
This is Joey Butner. I am at 3683 Kernersville Road, 27107. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of the board here. The issues that I have with this proposal has to do with the infrastructure. And I know a lot's been said on the traffic on the roads and everything, but I'm not sure how old the traffic study is that's being used. But the traffic on Kernersville Road is absolutely horrible. I mean, I don't think you'll find anyone on Kernersville Road that lives anywhere near here that says it's not so. And you know, I think that if you really wanted to find out how bad the traffic was, maybe talk to some of the bus drivers, the school bus drivers, and that'll give you an idea of how bad it really is. And I think adding anything more to this right now would be awful. And the other thing is the schools. You know, I want to counter on the schools too. We recently fostering a 15-year-old boy, and he's going to East Forsyth School. But it was very difficult to get him into East Forsyth School because they were full. They were beyond capacity. So I'm not quite sure how, you know, where the numbers are coming from that these schools are not full. These schools are full. And like I said, it was very difficult to get him in there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think the infrastructure is in place to add this many more homes on the Kernersville Road. I would much prefer that the infrastructure be completed, because you've got the interchange going in. That's about a mile from this property. They're going to be rerouting a lot of traffic on the Kernersville Road. They're closing down some of the connector roads, so that's going to even be even more traffic. And I don't think that's figured into any road study. So
I totally agree.
Yeah, I think that, and also I want to count the other thing where Miss Shirley was saying, I think it was Miss Shirley was saying that, you know, all these new homes are going to be more than 100, 150 feet from any dwelling. Well, I have a modular home on there that's probably within 60 feet of one of their proposals. If you look at units 12, 13, and 14, it's very, very close to that modular home. And you know, there's a lot of other, you know, we went to the community meeting, there was a whole lot of people there, and almost everyone there was against this. And there's a lot of reasons that I haven't given here, but, and I'll let other people speak on it, but the feeling of everyone around this whole project is that they really don't want to see this happen. And I'll just close out with that.
Yes, and I totally agree. This is Mitzi again. And did y'all receive our petition that we turned in?
When was it turned in, and who was it turned into?
It was turned in on, this is Debbie Blake, and I'm at 240 Dumont Drive, 27107. And I have the official email here where they accepted it on August the 25th at 2:37 p.m. by Sabrina Stowe. I also provided a letter attached to the petition, and they said and requested that it be presented to the city board plan meeting for the ones who were against this development and proposal. And we also provided and outlined the reasons for the petition. And it was also mentioned during the time that Mr. Butler also indicated during the public meeting that was held at the Sedge Garden Recreation Center. And they promised me that it would be filed and provided to the city board planning meeting.
Well, just FYI, that was sent to the community assistance liaison for the council member, and that wasn't officially submitted to us. So, I mean, again, maybe she is planning on giving it to the council member before it goes to city council, but we didn't directly receive it. So therefore it wasn't included. But there are a number of letters that are included in our packet from folks who are in opposition, but the petition itself is not. That's why I was asking. Okay. With that, Mr. Chairman, I know that Ms. Blake just started speaking, and she did give her name and information. There is 7 minutes remaining, and Ms. Blake, Ms. Swaim, and Ms. Petrie are all remaining to speak. So Ms. Blake, if you want to continue, we'll try to chase down that petition, but you may want to resend it and send it into planning staff. Gary Roberts, you can send it to Gary. I believe Gary's your email, Gary R at cityofws.org. If you'll send that to him, we will include it in the information that goes from us up to city council. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you for that information. I'd just like to ask Nick Burns, when was that traffic study done? And at what time of the day was it conducted? Because it looked like there was absolutely no traffic on that road, and that's insane, because there's never not a time when there's not traffic on that road.
I was the one that took the pictures, Ms. Blake, if that's what you're referring to. During normal work hours, I do not remember the specific time of day. But if you're referring to those pictures, the images on site, I was the one that took those. But
I find it hard to believe that you were able to take those pictures during normal working hours and there was absolutely no traffic in any direction at that time of day.
Well, I did choose my time to step out on the road cautiously. Maybe it was at around 10 o'clock, or it could have been at 1:30 or 2:30. I just don't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay, and I also have a question to direct to Kyle, the developer.
Yes, ma'am.
The lady who presented the proposal kept mentioning the buffering, that my property backs up to, actually, you're coming over onto my property line with the proposal that you have on that map. Because my property line goes over the dirt road, which is Calvin Road. So I would like to know, when she mentioned 12-foot buffering, is that just for trees, or are you proposing putting in like a sound barrier wall or something to where we don't have to look at rooftops?
Yeah, so we would not be putting in a sound barrier wall, and we certainly wouldn't be coming up Calvin Road where it turns into a dirt road there. We'll only stay on our property, and we're not allowed to disturb any further limits, and we wouldn't want to. So we would be within our own surveyed property there. And as far as the buffer, I believe it's a 20-foot buffer We'll have some required plantings that will go in there that'll meet the conditions of planning staff and engineering staff at the city. And if we have to plant anything new, we'll do that. We'll also try to maintain as much of the existing vegetation and tree line that's there as well. And then I don't know, Sarah, if you're able to share again on the screen that image that shows the distance between the homes that back up to that dirt road there and that actually have that on their property line. But I believe there's over 75 feet between the homes at least and a grade change. So I would be shocked if you could see into each other's backyards at all.
And Mr. DiPatera, you were correct. It is a 20-foot type 2 buffer yard around your perimeter and around the back of the homes on Dumont that you mentioned. That consists of every linear 100 feet, and a lot of those lots are about 100 feet wide. There's 2 deciduous trees that are required, 10 shrubs that are required, and 12 evergreen plantings. Those are your hollies and cedars that have to be 6 foot tall at installation per 100 feet that would be installed. So again, two trees, 12 evergreens, and 10 shrubs per 100 feet.
Mr. Chairman, and Ms. Blake, there are 4.5 minutes left. I'm not sure how much more, Ms. Blake, you have.
This is Patty Petrie. Can I have a moment?
Yes, ma'am, I'm done. Thank you for your time.
All right, Ms. Petrie, if you would just give your name and address and zip code for the record, please.
It's my husband, John, and Patty with an I, Petrie. We're at 3456 Kernersville Road. So just a block from this development that's being proposed. We understand development is inevitable of these farms. We own one of the farms in the area, but what we're personally against is the rezoning to multifamily. We would like it to stay zoned single family to keep the feeling of the neighborhoods that are being built in this area the same as they are currently, not into the townhomes. There is not enough parking. The streets of that proposal, there's nowhere to park on the street. There's nowhere for these people to park. And if you're going to put a bunch of little townhomes. So we would like the council, the planning board, not to approve rezoning. Let the developers develop a lovely single family neighborhood, because to what the one lady said, and I don't see it anymore, I feel like they've taken it out. The new zoning, they could build 300 units there. They won't because of the power lines going through and the little lake that's already there. That a lot of the land is not able to be developed, but they could put in nice single family homes. The realtor could sell her property, the homes like she's wanting to do, but just keep it not as high density because of all the traffic problems we have. There are so many wrecks along this, and we've seen people die in our front yard from the wrecks that are happening on Kernersville Road. So please don't approve this rezoning. Let them develop it. Let the Archie Wooten-heirs get their $2 million for the farm, but let it remain single family homes, please.
Yes, I agree.
Mr. Chairman, there's approximately 2 minutes left, and Ms. Swaim, if you're still on the line, if you want to
Yes, this
speak.
is Judy Swaim at 3616 Kernersville Road, Winston-Salem 27107. I just agree with everything that's been said, especially about the traffic on Kernersville Road. Our mailbox, I don't know how many times since we moved in 32 years ago, it has been knocked over. We got permission from the post office to set it back off the road, and it still was run into. So it's just about the traffic.
All right. Mr. Chairman, that's all the folks that have signed up to speak. All right.
Can I say one thing real quick, since y'all didn't get to see our
Mr. Murphy, how much time is left?
There's 2 minutes.
All right, Ms. Williams, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I just wanted to let y'all know, I hate you did not get our petition, but we had over 61 people to sign it. And I thought that was a huge amount. I think it was almost everybody that knew about this in our area, because it's a small area. So anyways, it was an overwhelming amount that signed this. I hate y'all can't see it, but anyways, you'll get it. And another concern is, again, just our drinking water. All this is going right to our Salem Lake drinking water. And I know you guys are going to put in the water catchers, but I just walked over to the one that they put behind my house, and it is so deep, and it's an eyesore, like it's a crater. I can't believe that they would allow somebody, the developers, to put such huge places in our earth. But anyways, and I was told that they're going up everywhere these days. I can't believe we can't come up with something better, as smart as we are now. But it causes mosquitoes and frogs and all kinds of stuff too. And it's a danger for our children. I mean, there's no fence up. You know, I don't know.
Can I speak once more? This is Patty Petrie again.
40 seconds.
Okay, the developers live in Charlotte and Mooresville, I noticed. So anybody that's been to Charlotte knows how horrible their traffic is. Please don't turn Winston-Salem into a Charlotte for traffic.
I vote for that one.
And I would like to say one more thing. You know, I understand the realtor said there's a housing crunch and people are needing housing, but that's not our problem. I mean, there's other places that these houses can be built besides a place that's already congested.
Absolutely. I totally understand that. You just have to think about, and I'm a rational person. I'm speaking as a neighbor and a realtor. So, the housing crisis is a serious thing. And if it's not something you've been affected by, you may not know. But what if you were a person that needed to relocate from Charlotte or Raleigh and wanted to move to Crownsville?
Mr. Chairman, we're out of time.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Brennan, there's no rebuttal at this moment.
And Mr. Chairman,
okay, no problem.
Yeah,
no
we
problem.
are out of time. You're welcome. We are out of time now. So if anyone from the planning board has any questions that you would like addressed, you can do that now. If not, I'm going to close the public hearing and see what the pleasure of the board is.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
It's been motioned by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Sir, Mr. Bryan.
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan.
Yes.
Mr. Farabee.
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Mr. Leake.
Yes.
Ms. McCray.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I further move that the planning board recommend approval of W3493 with the additional right turn lane condition.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Lamb and second by Mr. Grubbs.
Mr. Leake, if I could just offer a couple comments. Certainly a part of the county I'm very familiar with, and I want the folks who took the time to show up to support or oppose this, but particularly the folks that were opposing it, to understand, number one, the way the process works, and that this decision we're making today is not final. You're going to have another opportunity to make your voice heard, and the folks that you got your petition to are actually going to be the final arbiters of this. So you probably wound up getting it to the right folks. But as to traffic, just make sure you understand the difference between what the traffic impact study says is the capacity of a roadway and what you may experience as heavy traffic. So in other words, that capacity is how many trips can that roadway handle in a particular time period. Not necessarily does that mean traffic's going to be better or worse. I just want to make sure you understand what they're saying and what they're not saying when you see those traffic studies. And as to townhomes and parking, from what I think we heard, most of these townhomes are going to have at least one car garages. The model for these townhomes looks like it includes driveways. They've talked about trying to deal with on-street parking and that type thing. So, I mean, they have to build into their design the ability to handle parking for townhomes. It's not going to cause everybody to just park in the middle of the road and block the roadway up.
Thank you, Mr. Grubbs. Again, thank you to those who came out, and just keep in mind again, after our decision, it does go before the elected body as well, as Mr. Grubbs stated. So we have a motion and a second. Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryan.
Yes.
Ms. Dunnigan.
Yes.
Mr. Farabee.
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb.
Yes.
Mr. Leake.
Yes.
Ms. McCray.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That recommendation will go forward to council as a unanimous recommendation for approval. But again, this will be heard by City Council in October.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that brings us to the last item we have on the agenda, which is case number B9. And it's the Gary Roberts show today. So Mr. Roberts will give you a staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. This is case F1608. The petitioner is Brookberry Farm LLC, and I'll try to pronounce this last name correctly, Berkeley Von Felix and Herbert Von Felix, or Heribert, for a site that's 211 acres, located on the west of Brookberry Farm Circle, east of Kettner Road, and south of Cedarmere Drive, which is within Brookberry Farm. And the request is proposing modifications to the originally approved in 2003 illustrative master plan and some development conditions for the single family homes within Brookberry Farm. This is Legacy's Growth Management Plan. It's located within the yellow Suburban Neighborhoods Growth Management Area 3, located just north of Shallowford Road, and it does abut the gray western leg of the Northern Beltway shown there. This is a zoning map showing the subject property. It's currently zoned MUS, mixed use special use. It's 211 acres. Just for some context, to the south there in kind of pink, purplish, is shown a future interchange there with Shallowford Road and the Northern Beltway. Further to the east, you have Meadowlark Drive to the right. Meadowlark Drive in between that is other MUS zone properties. That's part of Brookberry Farm. A lot of y'all may remember this case. It was about almost 800 acres. It was approved in 2003. It was a former residence, which you can see there right in the middle of the subject property. It's pretty much undeveloped now, except for the former residence of Bowman Gray Jr., who was a president of RG Reynolds Corporation until his death in 1969. So this large development was approved as a county case in 2003 for a mixture of different home types, apartments, townhomes, single family homes, as well as commercial there, closer along Meadowlark Drive. And then further to the north off the image would be, of course, Robin Hood Road. Aerial image showing the development pattern again. It's currently, again, it was part of a farm. So you can see the homestead there in the middle, the manor house, and woodlands to the north, and pasture land typically to the south. Further to the south, you have the Covington Place neighborhood there that also fronts on Shallowford. A couple of images on site. This is the northern edge there. This is off of Cedarmere, looking down Maple Chase Road, and the site is to the background, so that will be one of the connections there. And then further all the way to the south, Covington Place was approved 2 years later after Brookberry Farm was approved in 2005. Ordinance requirement was that they marry this street up with the Stub Street to the south that was in the Brookberry Master Plan, which this does here. This was intended for connection to the undeveloped property, Hilly Creek Lane. That's within the Covington Place neighborhood. It's within the West Suburban Area Plan update. Shows the property for low density residential as a special land use condition area, that small little e, and that refers back in the text to the Brookberry Farm mixed use development. You see the beltway again to the left. So the request is consistent with that residential use. To the left is the originally approved master plan in 2003, abutting up to the beltway there to the left. Included a very well connected street pattern with a lot of landscape center medians and islands, kind of a mixture of lotting sizes there shown in different colors. The centerpiece would be the Bowman Gray Manor home there shown in purple in the center. And you can see that red arrow to the south. That was the proposed connection. At that time, Covington Place was completely undeveloped. So it was an ordinance requirement that they showed stub streets for greater circulation to undeveloped properties, which that did. To the right is the current request, very similar to the approved concept plan. A few more cul-de-sacs than the original approved plan, probably takes into account a little bit more specificity in regard to the realistically looking at the grades. Generally the same lot counts, a little over 300 homes in there. It does include an additional stub to the west, which would go across the beltway. And again, you see Covington Place was approved 2 years after Brookberry was approved. So this just marries up that connection there, shown in the with the red arrow. Realms and Tomahawk Creek abutting the site, and there's a condition that they dedicate an easement for potential future greenway. And also let me mention on that, the other part of this request not only is in regard to the concept plan, but one of the major drivers is there was a condition for Land Bay 2 and 3. So overall, Brookberry was divided into 7 segments, 7 sections called land bays, and 2 and 3 had a condition that there be no more than 10% of the single family homes that would have front loaded garages, just to kind of address the streetscape there to make it more pedestrian oriented, if you will. And they've adhered to that on the built portion of Brookberry Farms. It is somewhat problematic from a permitting standpoint. So they are proposing to remove that condition that puts a cap on the number of front-loaded garages. That's the other component in addition to the master plan. Staff is aware that there are some traffic connection concerns from some of the residents of Covington Place. This image is out on the intersection of Covington Place there at the main entrance and Shallowford Road. There is a small right decel lane and a left turn lane going into that development area. And this is a portion of the platted area of Covington Place. See Shallowford Road at the bottom section there. At the very top image is that.
And then she wanted to say something at the end. It's like.
At the very top image, you see the green arrow. So that's the stub connection of Hilly Creek. That was always intended to connect there. So when it was platted in 2005, that was the intention there. It went all the way to the property line. But some good news is these little blue dots show stopping intersections. So it is a good connection as far as providing some connectivity opportunities for service delivery vehicles and dispersing traffic. But it is a fairly circuitous route. So there's 4 stops that people would have to make going from Shallowford to and from the Brookberry development. So it's not a real fast, straight shot. So that's a good thing. A lot of stops shown within there. Don't let this overwhelm you. These are the conditions that they're proposing to change. The two top ones there, it shows Land Bay 2 and Land Bay 3. The first condition there would be that they would remove the 10% cap on the front loaded garages. That was a development condition that Petitioner requested in 2003. They voluntarily put that on there for streetscape design there, and staff has no problems with removing those conditions. Also under Land Bay 3, they're wanting to up the maximum lot count within there from 300 units to 380 units. Although that's they're not really anywhere near that as far as in this concept plan. And then the last two conditions under the prior to issuance of grading permits deals with the greenway conditions that I mentioned along Tomahawk and Reynolds Creek. So it is a proposed master plan, has a few more cul-de-sacs than originally shown. However, it remains generally consistent with the approved plan. It remains consistent with the low density recommended land use within the West Suburban Area Plan update. It should not impact the trip generation for this use, and staff has no concerns regarding the proposed changes to the conditions. And therefore, staff recommends approval of the master plan and approval of the proposed amended conditions. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Roberts, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain why there's one connection that was on the original plan that was removed in the amended plan? I think it's to Beauchamp Road. I'm not sure, but
yes.
So you said in the staff report for several factors, it was determined that a connection was highly unlikely. Could you just expand on that a little more, what those factors were?
Sure. Those two factors are primarily the lotting pattern down there. There's a couple of homes that are built and makes it pretty unlikely that somebody is going to want to further develop that and put a public street into there. And primarily because part of I believe it's pronounced Beecham. I think that's what Jim McChesney told me years ago, is that it goes over a dam and it's not currently publicly maintained and would incur whoever would develop that would incur a tremendous expense to put a public street around close to that waterway and the damway and to meet city street standards. So that connection has been removed, and staff is agreeable to that.
Just a little bit of clarification on that. It is the lotting pattern has changed, and it's not a dam. It essentially city or state maintenance. Actually, it's state. Beecham is a state maintained road, ends on the east side of the creek that flows under Beecham Road, and Beecham Road state maintenance ends on the east side of that road, on the east side of the creek. And there's an extensive floodway and floodplain down there. In order to get across Beecham, it's a wood bridge on probably steel beams. It's not state maintained. And in order to install a bridge that would meet city or state requirements to allow for a stub out of Brookberry across Beecham back out to Meadowlark would be probably several $1 million, and there's not enough land that would ever make that a viable option. So in viewing this requested change, I believe that we felt like it made sense to remove it at this point, just based on those development patterns and limitations on public maintenance.
Thanks for that correction, Chris.
Thanks. That answers my question.
All right. Are there any other questions from the planning board for staff at this present time? All right. Seeing that, I do believe we have individuals here to speak on this case. So I'm now going to open the public hearing and turn this over to Mr. Murphy.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's somewhat fluid, the number of folks that are in for the opposition. It's been fairly consistent for the proponents. We have Daniel Dinsbeer here speaking on behalf of the petitioner. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are now 9. And the last count I have was 8. There are 9 folks that are in opposition. So we'll hear from the proponent. And then after we've heard from him, I will turn it over to the opposition. And with 9 folks signed up, I'm not sure if they have a speaker or a couple of speakers that they want to speak, but I'll cross that bridge when we get there, so to speak.
All right, just keep in mind that we do have a total of 12 minutes per each side.
Correct. So Daniel, if you want to unmute yourself and begin your presentation. And if you would remember to state your name and address and zip code for the record.
Yeah, my name is Daniel Dinsbeer. I'm at 1540 Silas Creek Parkway, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27102. I'm with Brookberry Farm, the developer. And first of all, just thank y'all for allowing us a chance to get in front of the planning board here. And especially want to thank the staff that's been so helpful. Brookberry is a very complicated development. It has been complicated for a number of years, and the guidance that Brian Wilson, Desmond Corley, Aaron King, Chris Murphy, Gary Roberts has been invaluable to us to help us guide us through this path. So wanted to just go through the kind of the what and why of what's going on and why are we doing this. We've adjusted our site plan for the purpose of adjusting to the market that has changed since we got this approved. And this allows us to do many more exciting things that we feel is going to be really good for Brookberry. A couple of those are the inclusion of estate lots and smaller lot products that actually the market is really demanding right now. So we really feel like this plan just helps us do that. And it helps us meet the market along with maintaining the integrity of Brookberry. We have millions and millions of dollars invested in this, and we have no intention of doing anything that would not be proper for the development or do anything that would hurt any part of our development. So we did have a neighborhood meeting, and the number of things that most were positive, but we did invite all of our Brookberry residents to participate in that. We had over 100 people attend. About half of the people were from Covington, and the large objection that they had was the connectivity through their development. So I would say we had about 50 of the folks who came were from Covington. Most of our folks were concerned with the amenity package and how that the pressure on our amenities. And I think there was an overall general concern about traffic in general in the area. The Meadowlark widening has, obviously exacerbated that problem. And so I think that that widening being complete will help the situation, but I think that is a main, issue in this situation. So like Gary said, we're well under the percentages of what we could have developed here. We'll be about 20% less than what we could have done. And so we feel like this is very consistent with what we had originally proposed, and feel like this is going to be actually a real positive for us moving forward as a member of the community. So I'm available to answer any questions that any of the staff or board may have.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Chairman, there's approximately 8.5 minutes left, but again, Mr. Dinsbeer was the only person signed up as a proponent.
All right. So, Mr. Dinsbeer, would you like to take any additional time at this moment?
I'm available to answer any questions and any concerns. So I'm fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you so very much. All right, so Mr. Murphy, I guess at this point we'll turn it over to the opposition.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Chairman, like I said, we do have 9 folks that are signed up in opposition. I'm not sure who was signed up first, who would like to speak. I'll go down to the names. We have and excuse me if I don't get any of these names, like a Pankaj Amasar. We have someone who's just labeled as Ashna. We have Seema Dixit. We have Alpa Patel. We have John Peschel. We have Alpesh Patel and Keita Patel, Sapna Kriplani, and Trisha Ferguson. So again, keep in mind, we have a grand total of 12 minutes. I'm not sure if you have a spokesperson or a couple folks that want to speak, but I'll just open it up to whoever would like to go first.
This is John Pichelle. I'd be glad to speak first. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is John Pichelle. My video doesn't work, but you're probably better off for it. I reside at 148 Covington Place in Louisville, 27023 in the Covington Place neighborhood. I'm here to speak in opposition to this docket. Specifically, I wish to lodge my objection to the proposed plan to open the stub road to connect Brookberry and Covington Place. I'm also president of the Covington Place Homeowners Association, and while I know most of my neighbors agree with me, I'm speaking on my own behalf. I was born in 1970, and except for about 12 years or so of my life in my teens and 20s, I've lived within about 3 miles of where I live now. I'm very familiar with this area, and as you know, the changes in this area have been profound, many positive, many not so positive. But there's no greater proponent of progress and Forsyth than me, and I'm very appreciative of this body and the ordinance that seeks to bring planning and order to our growth. But the zoning ordinance says that its purpose is to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents within the zoning jurisdiction. And connecting Covington Place and Brookberry is contrary to the purposes of the ordinance and is detrimental to the citizens of Brookberry and Covington Place most impacted by that connection. You saw some pictures of it. They don't tell the whole story. I wish you had more pictures to take the path through Covington Place. But Covington Place is home to about 100 families. We're surrounded by trees, as you've seen, tucked away from the high traffic mess that's all around us. We have very narrow streets. You've seen a couple of pictures on that already. We have sharp turns. Mr. Roberts put up, it looked like there was 4 90-degree turns to come from Brookberry through our neighborhood to Shallowford. We have street parking during the day. We have no sidewalks. We have no speed bumps. And like I said, we've got 100 families and they use the streets. Our kids ride our bikes, they walk their bikes or walk their pets. And the streets are the main path for all of us in the neighborhood. We have neighborhood lights, but we do not have street lights, and the road is very dark at night. There's no ability to widen the streets in Covington. Plainly, everyone on the backside of Brookberry is going to use that road to escape the metal arc traffic mess. And I heard tonight, it looks like that's 380 to 400 homes at least. So you do the math on the cars. It seems as likely that traffic from the west and from the north will use that Brookberry Covington Place route to bypass the traffic and congestion. And so we think and I guess I should also say, I don't think not approving that stub, it's not going to impact emergency services because there's an emergency services station at the top of Meadowlark on Robin Hood, and they don't need a cut through to get anywhere they need to quickly. I spoke with Mr. Roberts, who's very professional, and while this aspect of the plan, the stub road, may have been improved in 2005, much has changed in this area. And this plan's no longer wise. It's not consistent with safety. It's not consistent with good traffic management. And it's not good for the quality of life for the citizens most impacted. So I would submit that not approving the connector does not impact the ability of the Brookberry developers to develop the land as they want and sell those beautiful homes. I'm all in favor of that. But I request that the board not approve this plan to include the connection of the two communities. I have no objection to anything else in the plan. In the alternative, I'd ask for further studies to be done, especially traffic forecasts, because it's going to have a tremendous impact on the character and quality of life in Covington Place. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman of the board, there's 8.5 minutes left. So whoever would like to speak next, just keep in mind that amount of time.
Hi, this is Trisha Ferguson. I've also, based on a call with the members of our neighborhood, I don't want to say elected, but, identified as speaking on behalf of many of the homeowners who are also opposed to this. I did send.
Could you provide your name, address, and zip code? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Trisha Ferguson, and I'm at 5296 Hidden Stream Drive in Covington Place. And I did send out a packet. I hope that was able to get to everybody. All of this has developed pretty quickly, so I apologize you didn't get it further in advance. But we did want to make sure that in addition to the points that John just made, all of which are very salient, the primary objection to this is not in the development that is already underway with Brookberry, as far as this is a master plan community and is well underway. What the question is that for the amount of planning that's gone on for these homes going in there, connecting to this stub road, which may have seemed like a good idea back in 2003, isn't a good idea today. And it would be as simple as going through our neighborhood during a time when school buses are either dropping off or picking up children to see that. And that happens 4 times a day, and it happens right near the street that's been identified to be opened up. And I understand the initial thought was that that street would provide a southern egress, but it is no longer a safe option. And that's what we tried to outline in that document. So I just want to give my other neighbors an opportunity to speak, but at least to say out loud that we are already enduring quite a bit of traffic problems as a result, not only of Meadowlark, which, hopefully someday will be alleviated a little bit, but also because we're right there in between Forsyth Country Day School and West Forsyth High School. We have parents and students driving themselves, and we have so much traffic that you frequently can't exit or enter our development right now. We also feel like this would become a cut through for people trying to get around those existing traffic problems. And previous layouts of this master plan community did have some other options. So, we're urging the committee to look at other options that are both safe for the southern egress, whether it needs to be looking at Beecham again, or Rosewinds that's already there, or Kettner, but to give some more thought into this particular part of this proposal, to separate it out from the larger proposal of the Brookberry that involves the number of homes and the types of front-facing garages, but to focus on this specific of attaching to an existing neighborhood that is not designed to support that additional traffic and would come at the expense of our children's safety. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, about 6 minutes left. So whoever would like to go next. We have anyone else like to speak? We have, there are still 6 other people on the line. We have Alpa Patel, Alpesh Patel, and Keita Patel. We have all 3 of the Patels. We have someone with the name of Aishna, and we have Seema Dixit, and we have a Sapna Kriplani. I'm not sure if anyone else would like to speak, but those are the folks we still have on here.
If nobody else is going to jump in to continue the conversation, I'd like to take another minute to address the graphics that we included in the packet we sent over. We did try to outline, just as John mentioned, that the design of the streets currently in Covington Place are not really amenable to any additional traffic. We've got a hairpin turn right there at Gnarlwood that is very difficult to navigate right now with the amount of traffic that we have. Again, no sidewalks, no area for expansion. So looking at that, we've marked both where the bus would stop as well as this corner turn that's already providing, safety issues. I mean, we're saying we already have safety issues, safety concerns, and traffic concerns without the addition of additional traffic from connecting to an existing to a new neighborhood. The second graphic is just to show where we are in location at these different schools. It's one of the things that makes Covington Place attractive is that we are very close to a number of schools. There are great choices in Forsyth County, private and public. It also means that the 2-lane roads being Shallowford Country Club and Steyer's Ferry, both of which are only 2 lanes, are backed up for miles every single morning and every single afternoon. So we know for sure that this route through our neighborhood to Brookberry would become a cut through. People trying to avoid that traffic, people coming from the north to Forsyth Country Day and West Forsyth, people coming from the south to get up to Meadowlark Elementary and Middle School. So we really need to find a solution that works with their master plan community, whether it goes east-west or southwest or southeast, but coming directly south into this neighborhood it's just not a safe plan. And, you know, going back to the builder, he just said, you know, we've adjusted to the market. That's what their plan and the expansions and changes they've made in their development plan, they've adjusted to the market. And that's what they're proposing in their home changes. And we're asking for the same thing. We need to adjust to the current conditions, the homes that are there, the way the streets were built, and the traffic and congestion that is there. And we need to look at that before making a decision. We don't need to just push it through because it was originally put on the plan in 2003. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, about 3.5 minutes left, and I'm going to give one last call as far as the folks that I've mentioned several times. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Yeah, hi, this is Pankaj Amisar. I'm also a resident of Covington Place.
You would just give your address and zip code, please.
Yep, 250 Blackbird Court, Louisville, North Carolina, 27023. I would just like to emphasize all the great points that my neighbors have presented. They are fair and valid. We have young children of our own, and we fear for their safety. And our opposition is not for the development as such, but just the stub road that both John and Tricia has emphasized. And I'm here to second their thoughts. They all presented all the same points that I would have presented, and better presented than me. So I just second their thoughts here.
All right, anyone else? 3 minutes. Last call. All right, Mr. Chairman, apparently no one else would like to speak.
All right, well, seeing no one else, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed at this time. Turn it over to the planning board. What is your pleasure?
I've got a quick, this is Clarence, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for staff, I think. Connectivity ratio, are we way over? Are we way under? Is it just perfect?
Well,
because this wasn't a final plat, we've not done that, but just looking at it, it looks like it would certainly exceed, even though there's some additional cul-de-sacs, it looks like they would exceed the 1.2 ratio.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of reference, internal connectivity it's factored in via both external and internal connections, but the stub street provision is separate from interconnectivity. And as Mr. Roberts alluded to in his presentation, you know, the stub street is, you know, where the first connection is being made. But, you know, that substreet was shown on the 2004 master plan. And of course, you know, Brookberry, here we are 17 years later, and Brookberry is still under construction, you know, but had this been a conventional sized project, you know, Brookberry, you know, this stub going to Hilly Creek Lane coming out of Brookberry would have been there whenever Covington Place came in for their approval in, you know, later in the 2000s. Then, you know, the folks that were living in Brookberry would have had the same complaint, but the requirement in the ordinance for substreet is independent of the interconnectivity ratio. That's more, I mean, it factors in those external communications, but what the interconnectivity ratio is looking for is what type of internal connections do we have, so we don't have all internal cul-de-sacs. Right. So I just want to make that clear. And, you know, just a couple other things, you know, it was said that, you know, just provide a little bit of context that what was good in 2004 may not be good today. Well, one of the reasons why the Meadowlark corridor is as congested as it is that the city and county, you know, whenever development was being approved in the 90s and early 2000s, didn't look at ways to alleviate the bottleneck. We didn't look for chances to interconnect back across to the east. If you're on Meadowlark and all those developments that were built on the east side of Meadowlark, between Meadowlark and the creek, there are no connections going back to the east across that creek. So everyone has to use Meadowlark either to go to Country Club or go to Robin Hood. There also isn't a lot of great interconnectivity along the eastern side of Meadowlark with, you know, from development to development. Whereas on the west side, it was more intentional. And since we had such a large swath, we do have good interconnectivity on the west side of Meadowlark between developments. And, that's where this connection into Covington Place is still needed, in that it does provide those interconnectivity opportunities to be able to go from neighborhood to neighborhood without having to get out onto the main spine. The difference in this project from the previous approval of the master plan is the elimination of Beecham. But with the elimination of Beecham, we do have an additional connection to the west. Hopefully that will eventually get us out to Kettner Road, which will provide some additional relief. So I did want to kind of provide, a little bit of context there. And, the narrowness of the streets in Covington in and of itself and those additional turns are actually good, because it will cut down on the amount of intentional cut through, but it will provide an alternative means of access for folks in Covington that want to go to Brookberry or vice versa. Again, I don't think you're going to see anyone on the northern end of Brookberry that's going to take all the turns necessary it would take to get through Brookberry and Covington to get to the south whenever they could take Meadowlark, but it will allow for those interconnections between the neighborhoods for service delivery, for, to go in to see your neighbors and those kind of things. And I'm not saying there won't be traffic that will go through there, but just given the narrowness of the streets and the number of turns you have to take, it's not likely to become a quote unquote cut through.
Right. Last question for me. During your interdepartmental review, life safety, property conservation, I'm sure that you guys knew that this connection was probably going to be an issue. From emergency vehicle access standpoint alone, I understand that we like to disperse traffic. I'm all in on that. I get you. But from a life safety and property conservation response, is the connection, were the comments made during the interdepartmental review about potentially losing that connection?
Not really, again, because the connection was there from the beginning. So it wasn't one to add or take away. It was there.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question? I don't know if I should direct this to Mr. Murphy or Mr. Roberts, but I'm just wondering how people in this development would get on the Beltway. Which direction would they go to get to the Beltway, the nearest access point?
It appears that there's. Go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead.
Well, it appears that there's going to be an interchange there at Shallowford. I'm not positive of that, but looking at the maps, that's what it looks like. And I believe that there's an interchange to the north at Robin Hood. So
that's correct.
Whichever is the most convenient, I would imagine.
Okay. It's in both directions, and again, you could utilize the residential streets, or you could utilize Meadowlark. I think the hope is once Meadowlark is widened, that there will be greater traffic flow. But of course, there are planned interchanges at both Country Club and Robin Hood for the Beltway. And again, that was the design at that time. I don't know if the design has changed, but the corridor is there, and it would accommodate interchanges at both of those main roads.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say, kind of along the statements that Chris had, I appreciate all the neighbors coming to speak and sharing their opinions. But something that I've always thought about the Meadowlark corridor in this general area is the fact, like Chris said, there are basically no connections to those neighborhoods to the east or the in-between neighborhoods, which I think has really played a major part into the traffic jams that you see on Meadowlark. With the expansion of Brookberry Farms out this way, generally, I think that connections between neighborhoods do make sense, especially when they're similar in character and home price value style and whatnot. But so with this expansion, there's two connections to the existing Brookberry neighborhood, the future connection out by the Beltway, and then the connection to Covington Place. I do know that Covington, like people mentioned, the streets are very narrow. And there are some odd turns, 90-degree turns in there. Prior to my wife and I moving about 2 or 3 years ago, we looked in the neighborhood, and the one concern that I had in Covington was that the size of that neighborhood only had one entrance and exit, which to me was odd. But the connection here not only allows, say, people from Brookberry to, get over to Shallowford, but there is still opportunity for Covington Place, people going in different directions to utilize it as well. The design of the streets in Covington do kind of help to slow the traffic, given that you have the turns and the narrower streets. But I do understand the citizens of that neighborhood's concern, with kids playing and people walking on the streets. But generally speaking, I am a proponent for neighborhood connections. I do see the benefit for that.
Thank you, Mr. Farabee. If there are no other comments from the board, thoughts or questions, I'm going to turn it over. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryan?
He had to leave.
Okay, thank you. Let me make a note of that.
He left at 6:40.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dunnigan?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Mr. Leake?
Yes.
Ms. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Stillman?
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I further move that the planning board recommend approval of F1608.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any discussion? Mr. Murphy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dunnigan?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs?
Yes.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
Mr. Leake?
Yes.
Ms. McCray?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Stillman?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that was recommended unanimously for approval to the county commissioners, and that will go to the county commissioners probably for their first briefing, I would say sometime towards the end of this month or the beginning of October. But
Okay.
Everyone who spoke should get notice.
And thank you for everyone who came out. I know it's a late evening right now, but to all the citizens, thank you for your comments and participation. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Murphy for a staff report.
All right, if you'll just hold on 1 second and bear with me. All right. Mr. Chairman of the board, thank you for hanging in this long meeting. We do have a few items for staff report. The first one I'm going to turn over to Amy Crum, who's going to introduce a new staff member we have that has joined our department within the last couple weeks. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy.
Hey, good evening, Chair and board members. I'm here for a positive note. As some of you may remember, Dakota Pell Short was on our staff, and he resigned his position with the city back in January. And so we have been short a planner for a number of months, and specifically a planner who handles urban design and does graphics. And so we have recently welcomed Dan Rankin to our staff. He's been on board he's in his third week right now, and he comes to us from Cincinnati, and he will be taking over that position and handling urban design and graphics needs for the department. He has experience in education in architecture and planning, which is a wonderful combination for us. And his probably main role that he will be working on would be the UDO graphics that Dakota started. He'll be continuing with that, as well as taking over the Community Appearance Commission. With that, I will turn it over to Dan to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Crum, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's great to be with you this evening. I think Amy gave me a great introduction on my background. I'll be really brief with my comments. I want to be respectful of everyone's time this evening. Seems like the board had a pretty full docket tonight. As Amy alluded to, I spent about the last 7 years or so working at an architecture firm near Cincinnati, Ohio. So I'm coming at this new planning position with a lot of experience in design and architecture as well. And also have, as Amy mentioned, some professional experience in planning, working at a nonprofit in Northern Kentucky. And my educational background, I did my undergraduate at the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago in architecture, and got a master's in community planning at the University of Cincinnati shortly thereafter. And also served as a Peace Corps volunteer in what's now North Macedonia, which is just a small ex-Yugoslav country north of Greece. So it's an honor to be with you this evening. And again, I wanted to be brief with my introduction because I know this meeting's gone on for a while. So again, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to working with everyone on the board.
Dan, thank you so much and welcome. We look forward to getting to know you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Amy. I'll now turn to Desmond, who'll give you a preview of your October cases.
You all won't like this, but including the 2 cases that were continued from this month, there are 13 items that we have in for next month. 3 of those, and I'm only going to highlight these because they're special, and we always seem to have a little bit of we always seem to have questions about them when they come in. But 3 of those are special use permits that will be approved by the elected body. So when they come to you all next month, we are looking at the site plan, and the board is going to make a recommendation regarding whether the site plan is compliant with UDO requirements. So something to look forward to.
All right, thank you, Desmond. The next item is I'll turn to Kirk, who'll give you a preview of your work session coming up 2 weeks from today.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman and planning board members. I'm kind of the flip side of Desmond here, so I've got some good news for you. The work session is going to be on the lighter side coming up in a few weeks. We've just got 2 items on the agenda so far. Amy will be giving us an overview kind of where she's at with the request to revise the accessory dwelling units regulation in the UDO to make them a little more usable and flexible. That came to us from the City Council General Government Committee. And we're going to have Kaylin Francis, who probably hasn't spoken to you all very often, but she is our senior GIS and mapping planner. She's going to be going over some general demographic and population information that came from the 2020 census. We just got an initial batch of results from the Census Bureau, and I think you all will find some interesting takeaways from that. So beyond those 2 items, that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Kirk. The final 2 items I have are just coming up events that either staff's going to be participating in or upcoming deadline. We have City of Winston-Salem University that city staff will be participating in and educating the folks that are going through the city's program to learn more about city government. We're going to be doing that on the evening of September 30th. It is still live and in person at this point, or it was as of yesterday. You know, things with COVID are somewhat fluid, but we didn't get to do it last year because of COVID, and so we had this on the books before the case numbers started spiking. But as of yesterday, we're still planning on doing it anyway. So our planning and inspection staff will be going out and talking to them and helping them do some exercises that will help them understand kind of what you do and what the elected body does. And then the final item I have on the staff report is just a upcoming deadline we have. If you know of anyone who's ever expressed interest in this, if there happens to be anyone that's still watching, we have the historic marker submittal deadlines coming up October 31st. And, the Winston-Salem County Historic Resources Commission operates a historic marker program that is run locally as opposed to, the markers that are put up by the state. And there is a submittal process. And again, the deadline is for October 31st. And there's information on our website that tells folks how to apply for that if you have anyone that's interested or if you want to share that information with them. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything else. I appreciate everyone's effort tonight.
Planning Board members, thank you so much for your patience tonight. We're coming up on 3 hours, so we can either leave now for the good of the order, or we can wait 15 more minutes and make it an official 3, whichever you recommend. So, Ms. Smith, I'll let you decide.
Well,
Here's Brenda.
I have a motion to adjourn, otherwise I'd get a mutiny, I think.
There's a motion to adjourn.
Second.
There's a second by Mr. Stillman. You all have a great evening.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to meet you all.
Thank you.